On this edition of On the Mark with Mark Carman, Theo Epstein has made his move. We'll hear from the Cubs president. I'm going to react to my favorite sound bites from his press conference announcing that Joe Maddon is no longer the Cubs manager. Exit interviews for the White Sox. What was their favorite moments of the year? A bunch of White Sox on the show, including Lucas Giolito, James McCann, Aaron Bummer, and more. Also, a stop in the Bears locker room. James Daniels moving over from guard to center. What does he think about that move? And more from Pat O'Donnell, the punter, and now doing kickoffs with Eddie Pinheiro battling a knee injury. And our final stop today, Owen Daniels, Super Bowl champion with the Denver Broncos, longtime tight end with the Houston Texans. A busy On the Mark with Mark Carman starts right now. I want to start the show today talking about Theo Epstein and his press conference. 1 hour and 20 minutes Theo sat with the media trying to explain why the Cubs are moving on from Joe Maddon, the most successful manager in the history of the Chicago Cubs. He tried to explain what he was thinking back in the day and how that applies to now.
Because Joe was the perfect manager at the perfect moment in time for us, for the group that we had, and where they were in their careers, what they were trying to accomplish in the game, the identity that we needed to establish. He was the perfect guy. If I could go back and do it again, obviously anyone in this room would go and hire Joe Maddon again. And now we need the perfect guy for this moment in time, for this group, for where they are in their careers, for their skills and their habits. And there's a unique challenge at this moment in time.
Very simple translation, right? Look, these guys won a World Series. They're making a lot of dough. Some of them are eyeing a new huge contract. Chris Bryant, Javi Baez, I'll get to that in a moment. They're way too comfortable. Joe Maddon feels way too comfortable. He won a World Series, or he knows he's a made man in Chicago. Chris Bryant knows he's a made man. Same thing with Javi Baez. Same thing with Anthony Rizzo. We need somebody who wants to come in here, a leadership guy in the manager spot who's going to light a fire under this crew. And Joe is just not going to do that because he's had a lot of success and it's just not his personality. That's clearly what Theo thinks. I would say that it would have been just as effective to bring in some players who were hungry. Maybe you make a trade with Chris Bryant or Javi Baez. Both those guys have 2 years of control left. You going to pay them both? Maybe, but I'm going to guess the Cubs are going to be active this season. Here was Theo on whether he wants to keep Javi and Chris Bryant, and he certainly left the door open for potentially a big trade this winter.
I look at both those guys as incredible players who are huge parts of what we have going on here, and they happen to both have 2 years of control left. So they're both guys we've had some level of discussion with in the past about trying to find an arrangement that can keep them Cubs longer, and we'll probably get around to doing that again. I look at them both the same, that they're fantastic players. I don't think it's mutually exclusive. I think they're both hugely important, and it'd be hard to see him out of a Cubs uniform, but we're at a transition point, and we have to do whatever is best for the Cubs. I hope it includes both those guys.
Translation, we're going to make you a very fair offer, but we're not going to pay you over the top of the market, completely ridiculous to keep you here. Do you want to be a Cub or not? Here is a ton of money that sets you up, your family up, your grandkids up, your grandkids' up. Do you want to be here or not? I don't know what either of those guys are going to do. But if they won't sign, then I don't blame Theo if he makes a bold move this year with one of those guys to really shake up the roster. That's certainly in play. What's Theo looking for in a manager?
We have an open mind. I think, you always learn a lot when you have an opportunity to do a managerial search. It's manager of the Cubs is such an esteemed position. You should have access to just about anyone in the industry you want to talk to.
And they will. Joe Girardi, I know for a fact, wants the job. I'm sure Mark Loretto wants it, bench coach of the Cubs. I'm sure Mark DeRosa would be very interested. And, of course, David Ross, who was on the show last week, talked about how he wants to manage pretty obviously on this program, on the Mark with Mark Carman. Thank you, David Ross. And also on ESPN last night. Theo addressed that talking about Ross and said, look, we are trying to move forward. We are looking ahead. The fact that he's got relationships with Anthony Rizzo and Chris Bryant and John Lester, that doesn't disqualify him, but that doesn't make him somebody that we necessarily really want to hire. In fact, it seemed to me like it was a hurdle that he's got to get over. Cubs also need help at second base and in center field.
Center field and second base were the two positions where we had the least production this year. We had the most trouble. We do have in-house options, but being transparent, of course, it's an area where you look to upgrade and see if you can get the total package with the prototypical center fielder who can also lead off.
Those guys don't grow on trees. You going to go pay for Whit Merrifield down in Kansas City? Who you giving up? Hey, Kansas City, you want Kyle Schwarber? You're certainly doing all right with Jorge Soler. But I don't know if the Cubs want to trade Schwarber after an enormous year. I mean, Kyle really came to play in the second half of the season. A lot of questions for the Cub. And at the end of the day, I was hoping they would keep Joe Maddon because I think he's arguably the best manager in baseball. And I'm glad for the Cubs that Theo is sticking around. And he's been in a slump. But I don't think you throw Theo out, and I wouldn't have thrown the manager out. But they did, and hopefully they'll be right that a new voice will impact the team. I did like what he said about Joe Maddon as far as his future.
If I were in a different situation, I would hire Joe in a second. I would hire Joe in a second today.
And it looks like the Los Angeles Angels are going to be that team. Getting rid of Brad Ausmus. Joe spent 3+ decades with the Angels, and now he's going to get a chance to manage them, which seems perfect. Go out to the West Coast, chill out, live the dream. Tough division, but not a bad landing spot for Maddon. Let's move on to the Chicago White Sox and some exit interviews. One of my favorites from the White Sox this year was Lucas Giolito, absolutely dominating. Ask Lucas, what was his favorite moment from 2019? I'll mention there were a lot of accomplishments for Lucas Giolito this year.
I'll say the complete game shutout versus the Astros, because it was kind of like, for me, like cementing in, like, to myself, all right, like this is what I can do. And I put in the work. I'm starting to see the results, and I don't want to stop, so let's keep going.
Congrats on a phenomenal year. James McCann mentioned when you guys got named during the rain delay, it was great for him, but also it was awesome to see just the partnership for you and going in there as well.
Oh yeah. The All-Star stuff is definitely up there as well. I mean, that's like the dream come true kind of stuff. I wanted to kind of give a different kind of answer, I guess you could say, change it up a little bit. But I was pitching that day. It was a day game against the Twins. And yeah, it was like a rain delay, or the game was called early because of rain, but like we got announced as All-Stars right before the game. And so that was really cool, going out to pitch, like just then learning about that. So yeah, great year, a lot of fun.
Best moment next year, see your future be your future?
If I'm talking about best moments, I'd like holding up a trophy to be one of those. We got a lot of work to get there, but we got the talent, that's for sure.
Indeed, the White Sox are piling up some talent over there. One of my favorite guys out of the bullpen this year was Aaron Bummer. What about your favorite moment Mr. Left-hander.
Eloy's home run in Wrigley Field.
A high fly ball into deep left field. Schwarber turns and looks, and it's gone. Eloy Jimenez has just hit a 2-run bomb. And it's 3-1 White Sox.
Jimenez floats around the bases here at Wrigley Field in his first ever game against his former team.
What do you remember most about that particular moment?
The entire game. The entire game was incredible. I mean, just the chance going back and forth, the White Sox Cubs. Eloy coming up in the bottom, I think, or what it was, at the top of the 8th. Yeah, I think it was the top of the 8th, and hitting that home run, man, and just the deafening silence from the Cubs fans and the absolute roar of the White Sox fans. It was something that, you know, it had that atmosphere of just incredible. I mean, I've never been to the playoffs, but I mean, it felt something out of that storybook of where Eloy coming up with a big hit against his old team, and that was just, I mean, that was the most fun game that I've played, and that was the most exciting game that I was part of.
And the atmosphere that night at Wrigley Field was incredible. 9th inning, Eloy hitting the 2-run homer and just floating around the bases. And Sox fans going crazy, and Cub fans thinking, oh my God, it was sweet when we traded for Sammy Sosa, but now we gave up Eloy Jimenez, Dylan Cease, and we got, as my buddy David Kaplan likes to say, a Buick in return in Jose Quintana. Let's do one more out of that White Sox clubhouse, and you may not know who Yolmer Sanchez is unless you're a White Sox fan. But Yolmer is your standard second baseman, shortstop, third baseman, utility guy, starter on a bad team, off the bench on a good team, but great guy in the clubhouse. Always energetic, always ready to go. And if I was a major leaguer, I think this would be my answer if you asked me my favorite moment in any year, this year being 2019. Give me the Yolmer Sanchez favorite moment of 2019.
I have my second son. My second son. That's how they say.
Yeah, you're right.
So, yeah, my second son born in May. So I think that was my favorite moment of 2019.
What about on the field?
On the field? Oh, I mean, I enjoy every second, and I don't know. I hit a walkout this year, but I think every day is a special. It's a special day to be in big league, to play in big league and spend time with in a big league clubhouse. So, I mean, I enjoy it from day one to today.
I just love it. Being in a big league clubhouse. I just love it, being in a big league clubhouse, not taking it for granted. This is an incredible life that I am able to live, and I know it's not going to last forever. I worked incredibly hard to get here, and I just love coming to the ballpark every day and being around my teammates and being coached by the best coaches and running out on the field and 30,000 or 15,000. I don't care how many fans. I get to be in the big leagues, the most exclusive country club on the planet. I love it, Yolmer Sanchez. You are a good man. Let's switch from the White Sox and the Cubs over to the Chicago Bears. And, yes, spending some time in the locker room this week. The Bears have a punter in Pat O'Donnell who is just the guy that you see at the gym who's eating kale and lifting weights. It just doesn't look like a punter. First of all, he's like 6'4", and second of all, he's in phenomenal shape. So I had a slightly awkward interview with Pat O'Donnell. Would you consider yourself the most in-shape punter in the NFL? I mean, you look like you could run a marathon.
I'd put me up there. Yeah. There's some guys that take pride in their appearance, but I get a lot of grief for that in the locker room, though.
Should a punter take pride in his appearance?
I think every player should. I mean, your body's your livelihood. As long as you can keep that healthy,
hopefully you'll play as long as you can.
Do you go straight kale? Would you throw in what's the smoothie of choice? Or I feel like you haven't had pizza in 3 years.